Hello, and we're back in Kerbal Space Program, World War K. After the aftermath of the battle over Duna, the mech jib units have pulled out because, well, we had a heavy fighter left with hardly any damage and a full complement of missiles. However, we have a small problem in that we have one basically destroyed fighter and the remains of the frigate, both of which have crew on board. Now, we have lost 4 Kerbals. There were 2 Kerbals in each of the side turrets on the frigate, and their sacrifice in the battle will be remembered. However, our immediate concern is the 2 Kerbals on board the frigate and the 2 Kerbals on board the destroyed heavy fighter. Somehow we have to get them somewhere safe, not floating around in a debris cloud in orbit waiting for mech jib units to show up again. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and EVA them and get them to rendezvous and basically re-enter Duna. You can see here, we're in pretty much a low orbit over Duna. Ike is a possibility, but it's pretty far out, and there isn't an atmosphere to slow their fall. So I think the option here is pretty much to try and land them on Duna. So we're going to have to see what we can do. It's going to be interesting, certainly. So let us start EVAing our crew and moving them over to the damaged, or well, destroyed heavy fighter cockpit. As you can see, the colours on the spacesuits vary from a Kerbal to Kerbal. So this is a Kerbal from the Elysian Empire, so he's of course got a blue spacesuit with a blue visor. Because they're all obviously all working together on this joint task force to fight the mech jib units. They are all working together and pooling their collective resources. However, they keep this distinctive colouring on their suit just, as a bit of a symbol of pride more than anything else. Hello, Wildorf Kerman. Now, Wildorf is, he's the leader of this task force, and the fact that only one ship seems to have survived so far, possibly not the best sign. However, we did destroy the fuel tanker that we intended to attack, so I guess that counts as a kind of a win, except for the fact we lost a lot of units. I think it basically comes down to draw on that one. Now, people have complained at me for saying, oh, why can the Kerbals never win? I'm not, rigging the games. One of my pet hates about series is when they do things that involve gameplay is rigging the gameplay, because gameplay is emergent, and the stories come out of gameplay is kind of the awesome thing about gameplay in itself, that you can make a story out of even a game that doesn't have a storyline. It's called emergent gameplay. And you can have emergent storylines coming out of basically playing a game. And that's what I love about being able to do sort of sandbox games, is that you create your own storyline as you go along. So I'm never going to rig one of these episodes to make an outcome happen, because that's not the way it is. As it is now, we have a load of Kerbals who are pushing each other off. I can't seem to get 2 of them on at once, so I think I might have to try and figure something else out. I'm going to try and put another one on, see if I can get 2 of them on there at once. But as it is, we've now got this lovely situation. We're having to try and save 4 Kerbals, and of course the 2 in the heavy fighter, because the heavy fighter doesn't have a warp drive. We're going to have to do something with them as well. Which we wouldn't have otherwise had. The way of emergent storytelling and gameplay, and it's just amazing. I absolutely love it. Now, what should we do with him? I think if we put him on the heavy fighter, and we'll figure out what to do with him. Maybe we'll just get him to follow or something. So basically, we're going to use the heavy fighter to shunt the cockpit into a suborbital trajectory so that it re-enters Duna. And hopefully that'll work. Now, if we board... No, not board. There we go. Yeah. Grab on. So now we just need to shunt it out from orbit. Now, I will be playing most of this at time acceleration so far. I think you've seen 2 times time acceleration, which is why the Kerbals are impacting and bouncing into things at quite high speeds. But I think this is going to be about 2 or 4 times. I can't remember exactly, but it takes a while to try and shunt something out of orbit. So what we're going to be doing here is shunting out of orbit. We'll get the Kerbal who's currently riding shotgun on the heavy fighter to follow it down with EVA, and then we'll put the heavy fighter back into the orbit again, and then follow the cockpit down and try and arrest its descent and get our Kerbals out in time. Now, the highest anyone's ever done sort of an EVA jump in reality is, of course, Felix Baumgartner, who did it in 2012. So he did 39 kilometers and 45 meters, so almost 40-kilometer jump. Our Kerbals are attempting pretty much extra atmospheric, so from outside of the atmosphere jump. However, it is at Duna, and Duna's air pressure is much less. I mean, to put it in perspective, Duna's air pressure, in terms of compared to Kerbin's air pressure at sea level, in inverted commas, because Duna doesn't have a sea, is 0.2 of Kerbin's. So there's not a lot of air. But hopefully it'll be enough to slow him down on the way. Now, Felix Baumgartner, when he did his jump, did actually manage to break the sound barrier with just his body, in a suit, but with just his body. And it was the first time that's actually been done. Our Kerbals, I very much doubt they're going to break any sort of sound barrier, because the lower the pressure is, the higher the threshold for the sound barrier, because there's less atoms to bump into each other. So I think they won't be setting any crazy records for in terms of breaking the sound barrier, but this is definitely going to be interesting trying to get them to all re-enter. I don't actually know if it's been done before by any YouTubers, so this is entirely theoretical. I'm not convinced, but I'm certain that it may be possible. Just bring it up here, and now, okay, this episode was going to be slightly different, by the way. I'm just going to say that the episode's a little bit shorter and a little bit different from what I intended, because I seem to be having a lot of problems with the skillful mod, which is all the weapons and the damage and the missiles. Yeah. It seems to be breaking apart a lot of my craft. As you saw at the end of the last episode, there were some spontaneous explosions, which were probably that, and I've barely been able to resurrect the save file, because it was crashing every couple of seconds and everything was exploding. Everything. So I've just about resurrected the save file, but barely, which is why there won't be a save file uploaded for this episode, by the way, because there was a mess and I needed to get... Oh, there we go. We've got a lost to Kerbal. Okay. We'll skip right ahead now, just to avoid the having to watch what I think amounts to about 8 minutes of slowly pushing that forwards and trying to rescue Kerbals that fly off. So, as you can see, we have our cockpit, and just get him to grab on. Waldorf Kerman is now the one who's actually floating away, which, you know, he chose because he is the mission commander. He elected to be the one not being able to grab on anything. He's just going to have to watch the thing. And, well, apparently wriggle a lot. Maybe he's got, like, ants in his pants or something. That would be awful if you actually got ants in your spacesuit and then couldn't, you know, do anything about it. But as we go, we are pretty much descending increasingly fast as we head towards the atmosphere of Duna. Of course, atmosphere of Duna starts at about 41 kilometers, so not a lot higher than, say, Felix Baumgartner's jump. However, he was doing it in, you know, Earth pressure. We're not going to have the slowing down effect of much atmosphere. Duna's atmosphere is pretty thin. It's just about thick enough. If you stick on, say, a lot of parachutes on something, you can drop it. You really need to clean those ants out. There's something wrong. Definitely something wrong there. Maybe he's dancing. Maybe he is so eager to get down that he's dancing. But yeah, Duna's atmosphere is going to be interesting, because the way we're going to do it is we're going to get all our Kerbals out and try and get them out about now, I think, any second. It's about 25 kilometers I want to do it at. So if we get Wildorf into a position nearby, as you can see, the parachute that he has on him isn't ready for deploying yet. It's the Vanguard parachutes, by the way, is the mod that allows Kerbals to have parachutes. So we're just going to try and get all of our Kerbals out and then get them into formation, which is going to be somewhat tricky. Now, the reason that we don't have the Kerbals staying with this at low altitude is because Kerbals have a different coefficient of friction to the actual parts. I think all parts have a coefficient of friction of something like 0.8 or something like that. All parts, apart from, I think, docking ports. I think docking ports are a different one. And I think Kerbals, judging by how they're going faster than the cockpit, I think Kerbals must have a slightly lower coefficient of friction, which means that they're more slippery and they don't slow down in atmosphere as much. So we're going to try and use EVA to keep them together. Of course, we don't got them going outside of load range. Now, load range is increased to 10 kilometers by the skillful mod, and that's going to be incredibly useful. But we're going to try and get them as close as possible, because when we deploy parachutes, I think I might have to manually toggle parachutes on everyone if the the group parachute deploy doesn't work. The group parachute deploy, by the way, is spacebar F. So there we go, it worked. I don't think they're deploying, though. They've only sort of half deployed. There must be a shortcut for full deploy, but I don't know what it is. If there isn't one, I'd be very surprised. So we're going to burn up with them just to try and give them a bit more time for them to, fully deploy their parachutes and slow down their speed. Because otherwise, this will be a very, very unsuccessful jump. Right, so I think they've slowed down enough. It looks like they're going to be landed on this hill. Give them a bit of upthrust with their EVA, their RCS, sorry. And ooh, you can see the rocks below them. That must mean we are pretty damn close to the surface. So let's start doing parachutes. Full deploy. Next. Full, come on. Full deploy. Got to get this right, because otherwise this is probably going to be the most horrific roadkill ever. Getting hit by a planet does tend to put a dampener on your day. Oh, you've still got access to RCS when you're in the parachute. Well, it's probably best to ragdoll them before they hit the ground. I'm not sure what would happen if they aren't ragdoll when they hit the ground. They'd probably just ragdollize. Just better to be safe. Interesting enough, that applies to real life. If you're anticipating a car crash, you tend to have more damage or more injuries than if you're not anticipating one, because when you anticipate something, you tense up, and that allows you to transmit shock through your body much better than if you'd say you were still loose, because that way your body sort of absorbs some of the shock. And there we go. And another one. Yeah! Right. Let's start walking. Okay, this walking might take a while. One more, and just get him to face that way. See if we can just give him a bit of RCS, just to shorten the distance he has to walk, because it looks like he's going to be a few meters from the group. And down! Oh, he ragdolled. Oh well. I'm sure he can put up the scratches on his spacesuit, considering he just came from outside the atmosphere and landed on a planet in just his spacesuit. That's pretty cool. It's pretty damn cool. Now, there wasn't any atmospheric effects for re-entry or supersonic speeds because it's so thin atmosphere. And the Kerbals are all together again. Now, there were no atmospheric effects or supersonic speed or anything because it's such a thin atmosphere. So it is entirely possible that you could do this on Duna if it existed in real life, given a large enough parachute. Wow, that Kerbal is very happy. He's smiling a lot. I think maybe he's got some sort of manic survivor's syndrome. And back in orbit we have the heavy fighter. Now, the heavy fighter is gonna try and just come in basically the normal way. It's gonna fire retrograde, and then it's gonna point prograde, and then try and fly in. Duna does have a very low atmosphere, and we haven't successfully re-entered a heavy fighter into a planetary atmosphere as of yet. Which, well, you think the Kerbals would have tested such a thing before deploying into combat, but we were in a bit of a hurry, I guess, so perhaps certain, things can be forgiven, certain oversights. Now, if we point there, because I don't know how well we're going to be able to land on the hilly terrain that the Kerbals have actually landed on. So Wildorf's group is on a hill, but before it there is a sort of a shallower basin. So if we come in short, land on the basin, we can always try and coast up them a little bit, or at least lose most of our speed and then do a short hop. So we're just going to speed up till we hit the atmosphere. And there we go. Now we just got to point prograde. And there we go, rotation. Now, the fact that our wings point downward slightly at the side, by the way, means that the craft is much more agile because it wants to basically flip out. However, it makes it more agile, it makes it more likely to flip out. If you do the wings the other way, so they point upwards, you get a much more stable craft, but it's unlikely to be as agile in combat. So that's why I went for the agile wings on the heavy fighter. It does, however, have the problem of re-entry. in trying to keep it stable, which is possibly what happened to the last heavy fighter. Admittedly, there were no deaths associated with that, but it'll be interesting to see. We do have an escape system on this heavy fighter as well. However, if we have to eject sooner rather than at Wildorf's group, it's a long way to go, and I don't think it's possible to cross the rocky terrain in basically the EVA suits that the Kerbals have. And so far it looks okay, but we aren't losing as much vertical speed as I'd like, so I'm trying to pitch up and use the engines to basically give us more forward velocity. We are pitching down really hard. I'm trying to pitch us up, but it's not working. Now if we reduce throttle, okay, and then whoa, we're slipping to the side. We are slipping really violently to the side. And down, and I can't pull her up. And we've got re-entry effects. Oh, I think we're going to have to eject. Ooh, those Kerbals are a little bit toasted, but it looks like they have survived. Just. But it got pretty toasty there for a second. Ow, and there goes another heavy fighter. That's not good. The engineers are not going to be happy about that one. So far, the number of heavy fighters they've sent out compared to the number they've got back, it isn't great. Certainly not great. So we're about 19 kilometers from Wildorf's group, and I think that's too far to go, especially with this rocky terrain on foot. Oop, got to deploy the other parachute. Oh, they've got two parachutes. Oh, let's deploy both of them. I have no idea why they have two parachutes. Oh, maybe they were given one by the Vanguard system, and I've got one by default anyway. Because I've got the plugin that makes every Kerbal have a parachute, and then the Vanguard ejection system must give them another one. Maybe that's it. These Kerbals seem a lot more ragdolly. And land. Now, as you see, most of the Kerbals currently in this flotilla were from the Elysian Empire, with Wildorf from the Styx Corporation, the Styx Dominion, commanding. So far, we haven't seen any Kerbals from Northern Allied territories, but they were pretty decimated in the scientific battle we had, and they are only sort of rebuilding their infrastructure after the events of Kerbal Origins. Whoops. That's a little bit of a trip. Move you forwards. And there's a second Kerbal from the Styx Dominion. But as yet, no Nat Kerbal, so it'll be interesting to see when the first Nat Kerbal shows up in the task force. Anyway, this episode has been not quite what I initially intended, so I'm sorry for that, and I'm sorry it's a bit short, but I've been EnterElysium, and if you enjoyed the series so far, remember to like, remember to subscribe. You use YouTube, you know the drill. So, stay shiny, everybody.